Hello everybody and welcome to VFR. Today we are here on the ground in Helena, Montana, and we are going to be taking a quick bush flight up towards a couple of remote ranger stations in the wilderness of Montana. And we're taking a look at why you should fly the SimWorks Studios Kodiak 100. This is a really fun airplane, really fun bush plane with a bunch of configurations. It's a fairly unique airplane in terms of design, kind of similar to a Cessna 208 Grand Caravan, but a bit smaller. But a very capable STOL airplane, capable of carrying a bunch of people, carrying a bunch of cargo into really short places, really short runways that a lot of other planes have a hard time getting to. So again, today we are in November 125 Zulu, and we're going to be flying out basically about 45 minutes to the northwest into the mountains and landing at a couple of bush strips. We're going to drop some folks off at the first one and then go all the way to the USFS landing strip at Big Meadow. So the Kodiak 100 was designed by Quest Aircraft in the early 2000s, first flew in 2004, so a relatively modern airplane design. Obviously, the design is a high-wing monoplane with fixed landing gear. Again, similar to a Grand Caravan, but a bit smaller. These airplanes were first delivered in 2008, and as of 2021, there were 300 delivered. It's a very similar philosophy to, like we said, the Grand Caravan and other high-wing airplanes. You get multiple interiors with the SimWorks Studios one. We're in the mixed one today, but you also get a Summit, which is kind of your private passengers. Smaller number of passengers, but more plush seating. Tundra, more passengers in rows, more like a Twin Otter or a small airline. Cargo just gives you the back as a cargo area, and then you also get a mix, which is what we're flying today with some seats. I think we have 4 seats and a cargo area, so we'll load that up. You can also get a skydiving interior too with some cool skydiving related features from using jump lights that work. So that's a good one too. Now, Quest Aircraft was bought out by Daher in 2019, so this is the Daher Kodiak 100. It's marketed again as a STOL airplane with a high useful load. You get these, there are some notable features that make it good at this. This little discontinuity here on the wingtip is a design element to make it more STOL friendly here. This fixed leading edge on the outboard wing is slightly different from the inboard. So again, there's little things like this that make this airplane a STOL champion. Now inside we have a glass cockpit. You're going to use the working title G1000, so if you want to fly some G1000 stuff, it's a good one for you. And very commonly used by mission societies in rural areas and other smaller operators who are trying to access and move things and people in those very rural, remote areas. So the numbers, you get 1 pilot plus 9 passengers, a max takeoff weight of 7,225 pounds, fully loaded 934-foot takeoff roll, and a landing roll of 705 feet. So not very much. You'd go into anything that resembles a runway. 25,000-foot service ceiling, cruising at 183 knots with a range of 1,132 nautical miles fully loaded. Again, there's other models too, so you can get it with the cargo pod on or off. So depending on what you like, we're flying with the pod on today. But either way, it doesn't really matter. You get a bunch of different configurations, and they have a lot of liveries that come with it too. This one, the U.S. Forest Service one, is off flightsim.to. I'll link that in the description below. So welcome into the cockpit of the Kodiak 100. Obviously, let's get some stuff fired on and energized. Obviously, G1000 is going to be the primary feature of this flight deck. You're going to primarily be using G1000 for all your navigation and stuff. So then the working title G1000, it does work with this particular version. Down here we have kind of the starter panel. You've got all your switches for your starter, your ignition, your aux fuel pump, and all your avionics buses and things. Lights and de-icing and other bush-related things are here on this panel, and then we have the throttle quadrant as well. Fuel cutoff is up above us here, so you need to switch these into position before flying out. We're about half fuel loaded, and we'll roll with that. And starting up is very straightforward in this airplane, but you do have to do it right. Otherwise, you will break the engine. I think that was a more recent update. So let's close the door and get going. One more thing before we do. We do have passengers back here, so I've loaded us up as such, with people in all 4 rows and some cargo in the back, and you can see how it puts people in a little uncanny valley, but that's all right. And get some cargo in the back. I can hop back to my rear spot. You can see we've got boxes of stuff here in the cargo area. And that's dynamic, so if you don't fill one spot, it'll leave cargo out of that spot in the weight and balance. So that's pretty cool, especially I especially like it for cargo. I'm not a huge fan of the people avatars, but cargo, it's nice. So starting up, this does come with a pretty detailed in-game checklist as well. So that is a good thing if you you appreciate that kind of stuff. So starting with engine start now, we're getting ready to go. Make sure our fuel shutoff are on and our fuel cutoff is pushed in. We're then going to make sure that our prop lever is forward. Okay, that's better. So props full forward. We're going to leave mixture in the idle cutoff for now. We'll open up the throttle just a little bit. Doors are closed. We can open up our little hatch to warn everybody that we're about to start our engines and listen to the engine sounds. Fuel shutoff in both are on. Okay. So you also have a couple different ways. We're going to do a low motor start, which means we're going to use the ignition on, starter to low motor, and we'll turn the aux fuel pumps on. We turn our beacon light on. Ignition on, and then low motor. Now we're watching our NG till it gets to 14%. Once it's a 14, we can move our mixture to the idle cutoff, from idle cutoff to low idle, and we should see it spool up to 50. If it hangs around 20%, you've done it wrong, and if you leave it like that, you can blow up the engine. Now, as far as our route, we are here at Kilo Hotel Lima, November. We're going to depart out to basically the northwest. Avoiding the mountains, we'll probably do a little bit of terrain avoidance flying. This is going to be a VFR flight. But we'll be hanging out around 8,000 feet. Probably. So Meadow Creek up here, I don't know if I called it Big Creek or Big Meadow or whatever. 4,000 feet elevation. It's a small single runway strip. We're also going to be landing at this ranger station here that I've marked with GPS. It is in the map here as Kilo Romeo Alpha November. So this is from scenery from FlightSim.to. We used it in the King Air short landing video. And it should be much more manageable in this one. So that's the route. Again, nothing too crazy. We're going to fly about 75 nautical miles heading 304 north. And then land at that small strip, offload some stuff, and then continue on. Helena traffic, Kodiak 125 Zulu. We're taxiing to runway 27 via Charlie. Helena. All right, so we're holding short of runway 27 here in the Kodiak. Now, a couple things that we should talk through before we hit the runway. We're going to be rotating around 60 knots, or whenever it really wants to fly. We shouldn't be too limited. Take off at around 79 knots, and then climbing out. If we're flaps 20, it's 88 knots, or 101 flaps up. We'll be aiming for a cruise of around 170 knots. That's the max cruise. We should have plenty of fuel. Torques are also important in this airplane, so you're going to be watching really to determine your max power, the torque. So here we just shows 210 foot-pounds, shows you the limits here. Cruise for takeoff at 2200 RPM, we're limited to 1790 foot-pounds. Climb and cruise, we're limited to 1670. And again, we'll be pretty close to 100% if you're looking at NG, but we just want to make sure that our torque remains below all of that. Helena traffic, Kodiak 125 Zulu is taking runway 27. We're going to be departing out to the northwest. Helena. Strobes on, pitot heat can come on. We can also get our aux fuel pump back on for the takeoff. And again, as far as buttons and switches, this is not a terribly complex airplane. I think it really shines in terms of the performance and understanding of the operating envelope. So that's 27, we're good. We're going to advance the throttle, go to high idle. And we want to make sure that we're below 2200 RPM. At 60 knots, we can start to think about rotating. And it doesn't take much, so we're coming off the runway now. And away we go. All right, on the climb out, we can reduce the power a bit, but we're actually good. 1620, 2190 RPM. So that's all looking pretty good. We're going to go to intercept our GPS course and try to climb out around 100 knots. Again, big runway, you don't really need the flaps, but once you're starting to operate into and out of STOL strips like we're going to, they will become more important. So let's turn the aux fuel pumps off as well. All right, so we're here cruising at about 9,500 feet. Again, service ceiling of 25,000. You can go pretty high, but it's not going to be climbing like a big fast jet. So keep that in mind as you're flying along. But we'll let it pick up some speed, get up and get going. We should be to our first destination in about 20 minutes or so. Now, this airplane is a lot of fun. I really think where it shines is in how it feels when you're flying at those low speeds. When you're doing those STOL approaches, it feels very dynamic when compared to some other airplanes. I think in this one you feel like it's a lot bumpier, and if you're loaded cargo weird, if you've got some kind of offset imbalance in there, you will feel that when you're flying low and slow. So that is really cool. It'll impact your stall speed. I think it's a really good model of the Kodiak, and they've I believe worked with our on actual data. So it is pretty cool, and it's just that kind of performance in those really critical situations where this airplane is doing things that other airplanes aren't. That's what's really fun about it. I also really appreciate the cargo loading is fun. It's a fun little thing, especially when you're flying around with boxes. It's a dumb little thing, but it helps you see that the boxes are in fact there. Again, it's not a real complicated airplane, but if you do want to fly more glass stuff, if you want to fly more G1000 stuff, especially on VATSIM or doing anything like that, this is a good candidate for that. Because you have some good performance, even with your fixed gear and being kind of big, you are powerful enough, and you can cruise at a decent clip. 145 knots is what we're getting now. Not sure what our ground speed is, but not too bad. We got about 50 miles to go. We'll hit that in 20 minutes. So it is good. It's very capable for your economy stuff too, just like a Grand Caravan would be, but again, a little smaller. Obviously, the bush aspect of it too is good fun. Bush flying is a whole separate science of how do you judge where I can get my airplane? How can I get my airplane? We've talked a little bit more about that in our Why You Should Fly the Savage Cup, but this is like that but scaled up. If you want to fly something bigger and heavier in those kinds of challenging bush situations, this is a great option for you. It's also just a good high quality GA alternative to some of the steam gauge airplanes like the 310R or the Just Flight Arrow. I would put this in that category, even though this has a glass cockpit and those don't. Other things to know, you do have your standard autopilot stuff, so your standard Garmin autopilot, all the options that you want. There is a speed climb and a flight level change and all that kind of thing. So you can use all of those features in this plane. And other than that, I recommend using the working title G1000 mod for the G1000 stuff. So other important things to know. Obviously, we don't have landing gear, so no gear extension speed limit. But we can go flaps 35 below 138 knots, 20 below 120 knots, and 10 below 108 knots. So the first notch, 138, the second, 120, and the third, 108. Obviously, like we talked about, torques are important. And SimWorks Studios provides the takeoff and landing tables for you in the manual. So if you're interested in really maximizing performance of this airplane in cruise and all the different configurations, they give you a bunch of tables in the manual that can help you tell you what your max torque is, what torque you should be setting, what your landing distance and takeoff distance will be based on how you're loaded and all the environmental conditions and all that. So all that data is provided, which is a nice touch, especially if you're trying to do that bush flying and get the most out of this airplane. All right, so we're about 20 miles now to the south of the Ranger Station airfield. Again, they've put in Kilo Romeo Alpha November, so that's what it's going to be marked as. Now, if I recall correctly, this is the one where you have to approach from up the valley and then land towards the mountain side. So we will probably go in, set up an approach, do a low pass over the field, and then we'll circle around to land in a full landing configuration. All right, so we're overflying the field now. It's going to be off to our right. Let's see if I can get a good visual. You can see the buildings right down there. That is the airfield we are going to. So we're going to fly up the valley, loop around, and set up just a low pass, and then we'll go around and do it for real. 132 knots. We can go ahead and bring flaps out a little bit. And just keep an eye out for the runway. In quotations. Coming back on the power a bit too. And there it is. You can see the patch of grass there going towards the hill. Now, when we go around, we're going to have to go off to the right. Make a hard turn to avoid the terrain. So if something doesn't look good, we don't like what we're seeing, we'll go right, not left. And there should be this patch of bushes here that we're just going to want to skirt over. So we want to touch down just past those bushes. That's going to be kind of our aiming point. But let's make sure there's nothing on the quote-unquote runway. We'll bring flaps back up, but that's pretty much what we're going to be looking for here. Got the windsock, we've got the Ranger cabin. Let's get out of here. And then again, out to the right. All right, rolling out, we're looking for the field. We can see it. Let's get our flaps out and bring the power back a bit. Again, we're looking for 108 for that last notch of flaps. There it is. Gear is not a factor. And I like to approach between 90 and 80 knots. For a STOL landing like this, we can err on the side of 80 knots. But even down into the 70s, you can still fly. I mean, the stall speed is real low with flaps out. So you can get down pretty low. We're going to aim for the low 80s here, because we should have plenty of runway. Now, you also have reverse thrust available to you if you need it. This is looking good. We got flaps out. 70 knots. And again, just shooting for just over those bushes. Little rough. And there's reverse thrust, just in case you're wondering how that works. Welcome everybody to the Ranger Station. All right, so we've departed and we're on our way up to Big Meadow USS station. Climbing out real low. We had to use full flaps on that departure. It was a little shorter than I thought. Fortunately, lost the recording. But up the river valley we go. We're going to follow basically this valley up. Till then, it's going to be another kind of unimproved gravel, dirt, probably grass strip out there. So the Kodiak, what other options are there if you're looking for something like this? Well, obviously the Asobo default Grand Caravan is also a glass cockpit airplane. You can also use the G1000 with it. And it is pretty simple. Just Flight also has a steam gauge update out for that. So if you wanted to fly something a little bit bigger with a steam gauge cockpit and some more detailed systems simulation, the Just Flight option is available. That's a good alternative. Or the default 208 is good too. As far as other kind of bush airplanes in this similar role, you could look at any of the general aviation planes. The Piper Arrow, the Cessna 310R are the other kind of two high-fidelity planes I would put in this class. This one is good fun, though, and you've got the glass cockpit that you don't really get on some of the other ones. You could also look at the default Bonanza if you're interested in something like that, but you're not going to haul as much or as many people. So, again, if you're looking for that mini 208, that's probably the closest comparison. And again, there's a lot of good resources. There's a lot of YouTube videos from several people who fly Kodiaks out there, too, in real life. So there's a lot of information out there about flying the Kodiak in the real world. So if that is something you're interested in digging into deeper, some of those use cases, I think there's a lot of good stuff out there, which makes this a fun plane to dive deeper into and really understand the performance. SimWorks Studios also has good documentation on, you know, what all the speeds are, what all your limitations are, or what your weight and balance should be, which is good. You don't get that with every plane. You can see the airstrip over here. We're going to, basically, we'll do a little low scouting pass here and then pick a direction we want to go. We'll come down here and fly in, check out the strip, and then we'll loop around up the valley a little bit and come back the other way. I think landing this way is better for terrain. We have a nice big valley, relatively, out this way. Now we're doing a pretty good job of managing speed. Let's just, again, align ourselves with the river, and we'll fly this in. Once we roll out, we'll go flaps. We'll get our flaps out to flaps 20. And just try to get a visual on the field. There it is, the big strip out in front of us. And now we're just going to start getting back, letting the airplane come down, not too fast, and bleeding speed. 108, we can do a full flaps. Gear is fixed out. We've got the fuel pump on. If we go around, we've got a little bit of room. We'll climb out straight ahead. We're going to try and approach. We should have plenty of runway, so let's approach again. 70 to 80 knots. We'll shoot for about 75 on this approach. We do need to lose some more altitude, so let's bring the power out. RPM full forward, mixture is in high idle. Looking pretty good. And the field elevation is going to be about 4,000 feet, so we have about 1,000 feet to lose here. And the approach is a little trickier on this side than I thought it was. It's interesting. Not really making a good straight in. So this is giving us 500. Speed's pretty good. like to bleed off just a little bit more. But right now, I think we really want to be setting up the altitude. Got the runway made. We also have this angle of attack indicator. If you're looking at that, the green dots in front of us, that is our angle of attack meter. Now we're getting a little slow. Now we're talking. This might even be a STOL landing here. And again, we're bouncing around a bit, but this is a very dynamic airplane in this situation, which is fun. Keep it coming down, clear the trees. Kind of aiming for that circle. A little float. Let's get it down. Yeah, welcome everybody to the wilderness. Alright, so we made it, and that was a good fun flight. Again, these are fun strips. I'll link them in the description below, but flightsim.to. And this is the kind of flying the Kodiak is perfect for, hauling cargo and people into these kinds of places and doing it relatively quickly. And it's a good fun plane, good fun model. Feels very dynamic, and I think there's a lot to learn if you really want to learn to maximize the Kodiak and get into the smallest strips very safely and easily. That's definitely a noble goal. And one worth checking out. So thanks for coming along. If you have any questions, comments, ideas for other airplanes you want to see, drop them in the comments section below. Like, comment, subscribe, all the usual YouTube stuff, and we'll see you on the next one. Take it easy, y'all.